Hi there, welcome to New City Church. I'm Cami. Our heartbeat is simple. Here we are learning to live the ways of Jesus so our neighbors encounter the name of Jesus. If you're exploring faith or looking for a church home, you're in the right place. Here you'll find sermons and practical teaching to help you follow Jesus, not just on Sunday, but on your street, with your family, and in your everyday rhythms. Let's jump in.
Sometimes when Haley and I are winding down for the night and we're putting the house to bed and folding clothes and getting ready for the next day, I will look over at my wife and she's looking down at her phone. And while she's looking down at her phone, she may just be sitting on the bed there, sometimes I find her sobbing, weeping, crying as she looks at her phone. And when this happens, I know one of two things is true. One, she is watching some very sappy pet adoption video in which there's like this stray pit bull that has lived in the alleys of St. Louis, and someone has brought it home and rescued it and like nursed it back to health and basically treating it as a child. Okay, that's option number one. Option number two is one of those videos in which a long-lost family member or loved one, someone from a great distance, oftentimes it can be a service member, someone in the armed forces, they come home and they surprise the person at like halftime, or they surprise the person at their school, and it's just absolute waterworks, right? Now, thinking about that latter example, if we looked at that and we got to the climax of the story in which at the halftime show they have the person like turn around and their family member is there, they haven't seen them in years, and the crowd all sees it coming, but that person doesn't see it coming, and they're up on the Jumbotron, but they don't know what's going on, and they turn around and they see their beloved family member. Imagine what it would look like if they didn't recognize him. If there was all this build, all this anticipation, and they turn around and there's a blank look on their face. And they don't know who that person is. That would be a heck of a buzzkill, would it not? It would feel like the moment has just fallen completely flat on its face and not gone as planned. But in a way, and maybe even more than a way, this is exactly what we see when it comes to the gospel accounts. We see doubtful, grieving, and confused people who can't even tell that it is Jesus. We read the story in a third-person point of view, wanting to shake or yell at the disciples. Can't you tell it is Jesus? He's right in front of you. He's not a gardener. He's not a random guy walking with you. He's right there. But if we're being honest, the first disciples of Jesus are a mirror more than they are a window for us. Because some of us in this room, and all of us at some point in our lives, fail to see and embrace Jesus for the same reasons. So much so that if he was standing right in front of you, you might not recognize him. So here's where we're going today. We're going to look at three core broken conditions of our humanity and how these are often hurdles and blinders and distractions to us seeing the resurrected Jesus. And we're going to see that the bodily resurrection of Jesus overcomes these things, not just for the first disciples, but for us. The same hope that was on offer 2,000 years ago is still on offer for us today. So let's talk about this first one, doubt. Now, I first want to say, disclaimer, not all doubt is bad. Some doubt leads us to deeper curiosity, to deeper exploration. Sometimes our doubt leads us to actually a place in which we come to doubt our doubts. And that's assurance. That's conviction. But at the same time, there are doubts that are based in cynicism. There are doubts that are based in skepticism, in hurt, in loss, in trauma. Doubts that are unfounded, but they're promising to protect us from being made the fool. Look at Luke 24, starting in verse 13. The very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. And while they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" Now, why did Cleopas not recognize the resurrected Jesus? Well, in one way, it's because all his hopes, all his expectations, all of his desires and dreams have been shattered. They have been absolutely burned to the ground. They were expecting Jesus to be their messianic figure who was supposed to come in, kick Rome's butt, throw them out, lead the people to spiritual renewal, be triumphant, be victorious, be sitting there in power, ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. And instead, their best friend, their rabbi, their Messiah, the one whom they most love, dies a criminal's death in shame, in dishonor, in public mockery, and humiliation. And so they think the good run that they've had with Rabbi Jesus has come to an end. And at this moment, their hope is past tense because they have believed he was a powerful prophet, but even this powerful prophet, like the ones before him, his run has come to an end. But there's also something else happening here. There's also a divine blindness. There's this build, there's this expectation, there's this moment of letting the tea kettle come to a boil in which Jesus doesn't instantly say in the first second, "Hey, it's me, dummies, here I am." No, he's letting the moment build in relational walking and understanding for the final moment of reveal, just like the soldier at the halftime show. And notice that Jesus walks with them. What does this mean? This is huge. The resurrection is personal. It's bodily. It's intimate. It's it's not a metaphor. It's not theoretical. It's not just an object lesson or some ethical analogy. No, it's bodily. He is walking in the same dirt on the same road that they are walking. Now, to fast forward here a little bit for the sake of time, in verses 19 through 29, a couple things happen. Cleopas explains everything that happened. He says, "How do you not know what's happened in Jerusalem? All of Jerusalem's been talking about it. Our best friend Jesus has died. The authorities, our own people, handed him over to the Romans, and he has been put to death." It says, "We had hoped." Their hope is in the past tense. And Jesus rebukes him. He says, "Oh, foolish ones." And he gives them entire exposition of the Old Testament and how all the prophecies and all the theology and all the ceremonies have pointed to him, Christ, who has to suffer before glory. He says, guys, the Christ always had to suffer before glory. Where are you guys missing this? And then this episode ends in 30. When he was at a table with them, he took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were open and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us while we were talked to us on the road, while he opened scriptures to us?" See, Cleopas and the other disciple now recognize Jesus. And it's not because of the Lord's Supper. Cleopas was not on there in the upper room the night of the Lord's Supper. He wasn't there the night before the betrayal. But it's everything that Jesus is. It's his mannerisms, it's his walk, it's his talk, it's his humor, it's the way he's eating with them. Everything is rushing back to the synapses of their memory of who this is. And see, some of you have real doubts and skepticism about the resurrection. You find yourselves like Cleopas walking away from Jesus because your hopes and your expectations have been shattered. And because something has happened in which what you expected has burned to the ground, and now, in the shattered hopes, you cannot recognize what is right in front of you. I want to do two things here. First, I want to speak to your mind. The mention of Cleopas is important. Names mentioned in Scripture, where, if we think about it, there are actually so few of words because it was a hard writing style in the ancient world. It wasn't easy to write like it is today. Names matter. When Peter cuts off the Roman guard's ear, we get a name for him. It's Malchus. When Jesus is so weary that he needs someone to help carry his cross, we get a name. It's Simon of Cyrene. See, if you were writing a heavily researched biography today, you would have 300 well-researched footnotes, right? But in the ancient world, you put names in there. You grounded it in history. You said, this is real. This is reality. And at the time of writing this, if you don't believe me, you might know someone who knows this person, or go find this person, and they will verify this eyewitness account. We also see something else interesting happening here. Cleopas admits that he has not believed the witness of the women who saw the empty tomb. See, in the ancient world, in the first century, the witness and testimony of women was not to be submitted in a court of law, and it was often not trusted as verifiable grounds for a crime or other kinds of witness. And yet, in the gospel accounts, who are the primary source witnesses to the resurrection of Jesus? Women. This gospel account, friends, has not been edited. This has not been curated. This has not been shaped and bent for ancient ears to believe. It is truth on a page, unredacted. Now let's speak to your heart a little bit. Jesus wants you to interpret the undeniable evidence correctly. He wants you to know the right way and all the right words of the prophets that point to him. This is why for 7 miles he walks with Cleopas and the other disciple to exposit the Old Testament scriptures to them. Right belief does matter. But way more than that, he wants your heart to burn. He wants to walk with you. He wants to have a meal with you. He wants to be there present right beside you in all of your doubt. Even more than wanting to have right belief, he wants you to enjoy his presence. And for some of you, your fear of being made the fool is preventing you from seeing the greatest thing to ever walk the face of the earth that's right in front of you. Your cynicism, your skepticism, that armor you wear is preventing you from purpose and meaning and beauty being real for you. And you might say, Chris, I can't be fooled. I grew up in church. I know the story. I know what's supposed to be right doctrine. I know what the right theological answers are. I know what the Gospels claim, and I know I've seen the worst that the church has to offer. I'm not buying it. But look at the story of Cleopas. Knowing the facts doesn't mean you actually understand the story. And just knowing some words in the Bible doesn't mean you've actually had a resurrection experience with Jesus. See, Cleopas knew the facts well. Cleopas was raised in church, and yet in his shattered expectations, he refused to believe the reliable witness of women. And Cleopas' problem was not that he didn't know enough. It's that he's wounded. It's that he's disappointed. It's that he's got a wound that hasn't become a scar yet. And friends, your disappointments and doubts, they may be very real. I'm not trying to undersell or undercut those. But if Jesus is alive, they don't have a leg to stand on. Because your single biggest disappointment in life will be that you do not have a resolution or an answer to death. And it's coming for us all. And that will be the greatest disappointment, that the grave will have the final say. And if Jesus is alive, the only one to defeat that, then he's the one we need. Here's the irony. In the fear of being made the fool, we become the fool who doesn't believe the reliable witnesses and fails to see what all the head knowledge in prophecy is clearly pointing to. And in that, the tragedy is not that we're just wrong. This isn't just about, oh, I'm right, I'm wrong. It's that our hearts will never burn. That our hearts will never come to life and be on fire in relationship for Jesus of Nazareth. There isn't a single one of us in this room that has a doubt or a disappointment large enough, scary enough, or dangerous enough for Jesus not to walk with you. Not just 7 miles, but maybe 70 years, because he is patient and he is steadfast, and he will walk the same road you walk. That's doubt. Let's talk about grief. John 20, verse 11. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and she wept, and as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting there. The body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where he is." And having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned to him and said in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Why does Mary not recognize Jesus at the empty tomb? Well, for starters, she didn't expect him to be there. She expected him to still be in the grave. She was going there to perform burial rites for Jesus in love. She's in shock. She's throwing herself into the busyness of grief work, which is what we do, right? Like as soon as the shock wears off, we throw ourselves into the work of grief. Oh, there's stuff that has to be done. There's funerals that have to be planned. There's wills that have to be attended to. She's overwhelmed with grief. And some of you know firsthand through lived experience that deep grief changes our perceptions of reality and our ability to see clearly. It's like a lens has been put over our eyes and we see the world differently. Our best science and our best psychology would say that deep grief, traumatic events, and this is a traumatic, world-shattering event, the death of Jesus, whom she loved, the one who had saved her from everything in which she once walked in. It changes the neuroplasticity in our brains. And what that means is the neurons, it's creating a new map in our brains to view and understand the world. And in this new map of the world that Mary has, Jesus is not supposed to be there. He's supposed to be dead, not resurrected. I mean, y'all know this. Usually dead people, they do stay dead, to be fair to Mary here. But the neuroplasticity in her brain has rewired her to see a world in which Jesus can no longer exist. And for Mary, here's what's crazy. It doesn't take 7 miles of theological exposition in a meal. It doesn't take hours on hours. It takes one word. It takes one word. Jesus says, "Mary." And it's in the exact tone and at this exact pitch, and it hits the exact ears that it heard it before, and it's transformative. And all her assumptions and all the rewiring of her brain that said grief and trauma and sorrow and sin and death were going to have the final say is now crashing to the floor. See, for those of us who have children or those who have spouses or those who have deeply loved ones who we've heard their voice time and time and time again, we understand this experientially, right? After I'm done working out at the YMCA, I go to the front desk and I turn the corner to the left to walk down the hallway to pick up Miles from the nursery there. And even though I might be 10, 15, 20, 25 yards away, if Miles is crying in a room with 20 other children, I immediately know that's mine. That is the voice that has kept me awake and haunted my sleep for the last 18 months of my life. That's Miles. I know it. It's the tone, it's the pitch, it's my eardrums being familiarized, it's everything. And in this one where Jesus is revealing who he is, resurrected, in perfected power, but also who Mary is. He's also saying, Mary, this was all for you. Mary, this is for you. And in seconds, it has become real to her that grief and suffering will not be the end of her story. See, some of your stories and life experience in the brokenness of the world have convinced you that in reality, in the rewiring of your brain, that this world can't be a world in which Jesus exists. But friends, there he stands in front of you, calling your name. And that voice might not be familiar to you yet, but it will be. Because he will always draw near to the brokenhearted. He will be there in all your pain and all your suffering, time and time and time again. And he's not there as an ordinary gardener just to plant some flowers to make your existence a little bit nicer in the midst of death. He's there to upend your grave so that your life will blossom into a new creation. And that's what's funny. In Mary thinking that Jesus is the gardener, she's half right. She's half wrong. But she's also half right because Jesus is a gardener. But he's not there contracted by Rome to care for tombs. He's the one who planted Eden. And he will show you the way home to the land where your brains no longer need neuroplasticity, adaptivity to deal with the grief and suffering in your life. That land that is the homesickness that we have never been to yet. In many ways, the resurrection that Jesus offers isn't just about resurrecting us into something entirely different or unrecognizable. It's about transforming us into who we were always meant to be, the truest version of ourselves. The version of humanity that did walk in the cool of the day with God. And here's the deepest scandal in the front to our Western and American ears. The voice of Jesus, not your own voice, is actually the voice that will lead to your truest self. Y'all tracking with that? The voice of Jesus that actually knows you better than you. I mean, hey, honest moment, vulnerable moment here. Who's lied to you more than you have? There are deceptions within us. In Jesus, he knows us better. He knows every hair on our head. And in this moment, he's crying out, Mary, and she hears it. And that will actually lead to our truest self. To become our truest selves, it's actually not our own voice that needs to be amplified. We actually need to be quiet and still long enough to hear the still small voice. And Mary needed to hear more than she needed to do. She went to the tomb with 20 things on the to-do list to care for the body. And she left being known by the resurrected Jesus. Here's our last one, hurry. So we have doubt, we have grief, and we have hurry. This is another hurdle. John 21:4. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, Children, do you have any fish? And they answered him, No. And he said to them, Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it. And now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, It is the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. Now, you might initially think, the disciples, what are they doing? They've seen the resurrected Lord, and yet they're just going back to their normal way of being. They're going back to their boats. They're going back to fishing. They're going back to their hurried way of life in which they need to earn for themselves a living. And in thinking that, it probably reveals more about us than it does them. See, when we are unsure about what Jesus has for us, often we fill the void with hurry and busyness and moving on to the next thing. And some of us don't feel the need for resurrection power because we're so busy and we're so hurried and we're caught up in our vocations. And being caught up in our vocations, we have found prosperity and we have found comfort and we have found the activity that numbs our souls. But in fishing, the disciples are processing a world-shattering event in the confines of something that is familiar to them. They aren't disobeying, they're waiting on the Lord, friends. They've been told, go back to Galilee and wait there until power on high meets you there. And so they are hanging on to one of the few creature comforts they have in this dense moment of grief. And why don't they recognize him? Could it be the lighting, the distance, or the expectation that Jesus wouldn't appear post-resurrection in that ordinary of a way, just on the beach while they're fishing? Maybe. But it's much more likely that the same reason why Mary and Cleopas didn't, it's that true sight is not just with the eyes. It's with the heart. We need the eyes of our heart open. And in this moment, they haven't seen yet. The heart has to burn. It's the way the name is said. It's the way the meal is hosted. It's the way a command to cast nets is given. Resurrection power is revealed and received It isn't earned or achieved. This isn't earned in our busyness, in our church attendance, in our works, in us just moralistically cleaning up ourselves a little bit. It's received. It's from power on a high that transforms the heart. See, for many of us, we haven't fully received the resurrection. And it's not because of a deep and unshakable doubt or a traumatic and festering grief, but rather, we're just too busy. We're hurried, doing our own things in our own ways, and as long as it brings comfort and prosperity, we think we are good. But just like with doubt and grief, if Jesus is alive, the power of your hurried success ultimately comes to nothing. Because in the reality of sin and brokenness in our post-Genesis 3 world, like Jesus, we are all going to die a physical death. But like Jesus, we can all experience a bodily resurrection from the dead. Friends, do you believe that? You can too experience a bodily resurrection from the dead. Friends, if you want to live with the power that overcomes doubt, grief, and hurry, you need to receive the only one who has power to do so. You can't earn it. This isn't some inner enlightenment you can achieve or way you can learn. It is given to us by the one, to be received by the one who makes our hearts burn within us. Just like Cleopas and the other disciple at the dinner. They think back to the road. They think back to the dirt path. They think, didn't our hearts burn within us? Here's what I want to land with here, friends, this morning. There's a story about Martin Luther, the great Protestant reformer, imperfect but great Protestant reformer. And it's not 100% sure if this story is true and historical or if it was later on is in a bit apocryphal. But I want to share it anyway because I think it drives home something so perfect and beautiful and profound for us. He was asked, what would you do if Jesus was going to come back tomorrow? If you knew that Jesus would come back tomorrow, what would you do? And Martin Luther said this, I'd plant a tree. I'd plant a tree. And they asked, why? Why, Martin Luther, would you plant a tree? Wouldn't there be other things to do? And he said, no, because can you imagine what that tree will be when Jesus comes back tomorrow in resurrected power? Can you imagine what that sapling will become in the fruit it will bear in the new heavens and the new earth? Friends, if you are not a follower of Jesus this morning, you have an opportunity to plant a tree. And not a sapling in your backyard, even though it might be that time of year where you're doing that. But you have an opportunity to receive a seed that will be planted deep within your heart, that will grow into something more beautiful and more profound and more powerful in resurrected power than you can ever imagine. James 1:21 puts it like this, therefore, put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. Now you might ask yourself, what kind of power am I receiving exactly? Receiving some kind of gift that is a seed that will grow over time in my heart with meekness? That kind of sounds lame. I want power. I want immediate change. I want something to move me right now. But friends, this implanted word, the gospel, the good news of Jesus, belief in his life, death, and resurrection, this is power from on high. This is the power that crushes doubt and heals grief and ends our addiction to hurry and busyness. And if you don't believe me, I'm here to tell you right now that I've seen a seedling crush marble and granite. A couple years ago, Haley and I, we were on vacation. We were in a tiny town off the Amalfi Coast in Ravello in Italy. And in this town, there is a Villa Cimbrone. And at Villa Cimbrone, it's about 1,100 years old, and it was built for the aristocracy in the Middle Ages and these rich and powerful people. And so there's these beautiful hewn marble and granite mausoleums and burial sites that are witnesses to these people that lived 1,000 years ago, and they look unmovable. They're hewn by human hand. They look like these powerful infrastructures that will never cease to fall to the end of time. But they are. I've seen cracks in that marble. Why? Because there are seeds that snuck into the cracks in between the granite and the marble. And they found a little soil. And over time, it grew and it grew and it grew in power. And that organic thing crushed and splintered and tore apart that granite. And friends, here today, that is what is on offer for you. But more than a mausoleum or a grave, it can crush sin and doubt in your life. And to receive that implanted word in your heart with the power of Jesus in the movement of the Spirit, it will lead to not just being able to crush granite, but a faith that will move mountains. And you'll be transformed from a sapling into a beautiful fruit-bearing work of Jesus. And your doubt and your hurry and your grief won't stand a chance. Resurrection power with just a little bit of faith, with just a little bit of soil in the resurrection power of Jesus here and today for us. And as we enter the new heavens and new earth, all of our hope is in this.
Thanks for joining us at New City Church, where we're learning to live the ways of Jesus so our neighbors encounter the name of Jesus. If today's message encouraged you, hit subscribe and share it with a friend or neighbor. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us at New City Church, where we're learning to live the ways of Jesus so our neighbors encounter the name of Jesus. If today's message encouraged you, hit subscribe and share it with a friend or neighbor. We'll see you next week.